Hello, everyone. First of all, thank you for staying with us all the afternoon, all the days, till the very last presentation. I was a bit anxious about having a full hall or fewer of you, but the subject has been fascinating from the beginning of the conference, and I'm really glad we had such fruitful and inspiring conversations throughout the days. From day one, from the very first presentation Ruth offered us, we talked about student engagement. Ruth posed the dilemma, the question, is it an obligation or is it an advantage? And she rested her case for the latter, and of course we all agree with her. And as the conference progressed, unfolded, we shared experiences for many different universities and perspectives on different projects, or if not projects, initiatives, if we don't like the word projects, and different strategies to develop student engagement. In my own presentation, which is the last one, has this awkward position in the program, I'll take a little different stance. My main aim of the presentation is to talk on behalf of the students, really be the advocate of the students, and present their views about their engagement with collections and with activities in museums, and see how they feel about all these subjects that we've discussed these days. Just to brief you a little bit about what I'm doing, I'm a professor of museology at the University of Athens, and I teach museum studies. This is my field, to undergraduate students of archaeology and history at the Faculty of History and Archaeology, and also museum studies to master students, which is a master program 15 years old already. And those of you who have been in Athens 3 years ago, you know that we have a lot of collections spread all over different faculties. We have 17 of them. And in our own faculty, we have the Museum of Archaeology and History of Art, with which I work very frequently every semester, developing different projects with my students. So, what I will try to do today is, first I will very briefly outline my experiences regarding the students' activities with the University Museum collections. I'm not going to present any of the activities, any of the projects in detail, because this is not the aim of my talk. Just to give you the context of what I will review afterwards. I'll highlight the strategies adopted for encouraging engagement with the collections. Again, very briefly, just a slide to point out what are my key principles in developing these strategies. Present the model that I felt that I could endorse to assess the main learning and social outcomes that come out of these activities. I don't reinvent the wheel. I used an already established and long tested model with which most of you are very familiar. I'll present it a bit later. And then go to the core of the matter and discuss how new pedagogies have gained ground through such experiences. Also, whether there has been a transformation for students' stances towards museums and museum collections, if we see them moving from what they believed in the beginning and what they felt at the end of the activity, and how all these create a correlation, if there is a correlation between students' engagement with university museum objects and collections and their later career paths. Because I have to say that whatever I tried during this process and this evaluation, I wanted to assess my students' views, those of the students who have already graduated and have left the university some years ago. So I could trace back their path and see how they developed in the course of time. So, very briefly, the activities can be divided in two large categories. I name them those that are voluntary. They're not mandatory. They're not obligatory. They don't have any credits for doing these activities. They spring only from their enthusiasm and engagement and commitment to do things with their museum collection, with their museum, which is really a museum within the building. In their everyday life, they sit from all over the building because the architecture of the museum is such. But many of them have not been directly involved with the objects of the collections, if not obliged through a specific course. So what we have developed in the course of time is some interesting events, especially during the International Museum Days in May, which have been a product of co-creation. It's totally a concept that has been developed a little bit by me at the beginning, but through the course and through continuous teamwork, the students developed the end product, which could be an interactive tour of the galleries with a very innovative and imaginative storytelling around the cast collection. Or it could be an artistic project based on photographic material that they produced specifically for this exhibition, taking photographs of museums and museum visitors in different museums in Athens. The theme of the International Museum Day that year was museums and cultural landscapes, and bring these photographs within our own university museum and make some juxtapositions and some interesting dialogues between the archaeology material and the photographic material. Or this pop-up exhibition, it lasted only 3 hours. It was this last semester in a seminar, in the course of the seminar that was about collecting and collectors. And the students, with my own encouragement, came into contact with collectors of popular collections, brought these objects for a few hours in the museum and interacted a lot between them with the collectors and with the professors. We consider an archaeological site also as a potentially open museum, and we are very lucky at the University of Athens to have an open excavation every end of April to the beginning of June. We have a site, very important site in Marathon, which we use as a training platform for our archaeology students, but also for students of museum pedagogy who work as facilitators in a public archaeology project that I developed at the beginning, and they co-develop it with me in the course of time, and they will provide an educational program to school children in the site while the excavation is taking place. And then we go to compulsory projects that are integral part of one of the courses on museum pedagogy for undergraduate students who are asked to develop their own educational program in the course of the semester, to design it, and if it's good enough, to have the possibility to apply it next year to real school groups, as we see in the photograph. This is teamwork, always. It's not an individual project. And another area of work is with my museology students, postgraduate students, who, again, in teamwork, they develop exhibition briefs for different collections and museums of the university. This example comes from the Museum of Anthropology, a team of 11 students who have worked brilliantly within 3 months, and they developed a really professional exhibition brief that is ready to implement if we find the money. So the strategies of engagement, my principles is that I work always with these key theories in mind: constructivist approach, open-ended ways, believing a lot in the multiple intelligence of my students and really applying them into practice. Learn by doing, experiential learning by David Kolb, really practice-oriented teaching. And at the end, what matters a lot is the cooperation, that we work all together to create our collective knowledge that every semester may be different. So now the model to analyze my findings, my data. Of course, those of you who live and work in the UK, you know very well this model. It's already very established, the so-called GLOs and GSOs, the generic learning outcomes and social outcomes, with these different pillars of knowledge and outcomes in different categories. We will see them later in more detail. And 1 or 2 years later, after the model was first established, there has been an extension of it, focusing on the social impact of learning in museums, as we see at the right-hand side of the screen. So what I did, I developed an open-ended questionnaire, just 5 or 6 questions, qualitative research, content analysis, and a sample of 33 answers, which were really a lot of pages. I had a lot of qualitative narrative text to analyze, 22 undergraduate students and 11 postgraduate students who enthusiastically answered my questions, and that is also a reflection of how committed they have been at the beginning and how committed they have been with this experience even now. So what I'll try to do is plot their answers, which were very complicated and very, very rich, along these different learning outcomes and social outcomes. I'll be as brief as possible. The first is knowledge and understanding, and of course we expect, you see on the right-hand side of the screen always the bullet points that the model provides in the website of this project is not mine. It's the main outcomes that come from each category of knowledge and learning. So, of course, we expect that they will learn a lot from these experiences, but what type of learning is essential for them? First of all, for me, it was very important to understand that they learned in a different way about the museum institution, what the museum does, and how important it is for our lives, and the social role of the museum. Something that I teach a lot in my courses, of course, with a lot of examples, but when they do it themselves, when they are engaged with the museum as professionals to be, they realize the complexity of their work and how that is important. And of course, working in a university museum, that makes it even more exciting, because they associate the university museums usually with something static and let's say a necessary evil in the museum, in the university. But they discover a whole universe of things that they can experiment with in the museum. What they focus a lot is how important it is to balance theory and practice. That might reflect perhaps a kind of pitfall of some curricula that are very much theory-based rather than practice-based. And this is something that we have to reflect on, all of us, how important it is to insert practice into our curricula more and more, as our colleagues previously highlighted. And of course, museology enhances these multi-layered connections with museum collections. We expect that. And this is what they say, that they were astonished how museum objects have multiple meanings and how they can tell different stories, something that the theory always says, but when they do it themselves, that has a different impact. Also, it's for them, speaking from their perspective as archaeology students, most of them, working in the field, only at the very end of their studies, they discover archaeology in a new way. And this is very important. And they discover how museology and archaeology are interconnected, and they can create this powerful storytelling in museums and different connections with the audiences. They discover museum pedagogy into practice. And also what they say is that they understand how the model of a participatory museum works. Something that they may find, read in their readings, but they don't understand. It's a kind of concept that looks very ideal, but at in reality it's very difficult to realize. Other knowledge, practical knowledge. They felt that they learned at the end of these activities how to do things, how to develop a public event for a very difficult and diverse audience, because these activities, some of them were for their for their parents, for their friends, or for students from other faculties in the school. Or they developed a museum brief, which is very important for them for their career building. And also what they felt important is that the museum is a human-centered institution. Everything we do in the museum has the human complexity and human creativity behind. And discovering the makers and users of the cultural productions for them is extremely important. Now, skills. Of course, they got a lot of skills in all sorts of ways, hard and soft skills. But they focus particularly on the creativity, imagination, the patience, which comes by working in a team that is not at all straightforward. They were fearing at the beginning this challenge, but at the end they enjoyed very much, even when they had some risks of breaking down. The fact that they were given responsibilities, that they were given the possibility to self-act, to experiment, and of course to time manage, because these things do not happen in the long term. They happen in short time, and they know that these are real challenges. Lots of other findings that come across. I don't have much time, so I'll go very, very quickly through them. Teamwork for them is very important. Working together, being inventive. also building their self-esteem and discovering themselves. Many students said that these activities force them to experiment with themselves and do a personal SWOT. They're realizing what are the strengths, what are their weaknesses, and how they can develop opportunities and get challenged. And also, at the very end of this, decide for their career paths. Quite a few students who responded, and I know because I follow their path, and I know that in the audience there are two of my students who have participated in these activities, and they follow Museum Studies master program in Scotland and in England. It's very important. So they said also keep calm and carry on studying without fearing the results of credits or evaluation. So to sum up, I will not focus on the social outcomes. These are the four pillars of the impact, I would say: creativity, self-esteem, responsibility, self-acting, cooperation and team spirit, which is very, very important, especially in a country like Greece where we have to struggle to work together. Career paths, professionalism and transferable skills in all sorts of ways, and a new rediscovery of how a museum works and what it is. And I'll end with this very brief sum that is just the words of one of my students who answered in hashtags. These were the hashtags for her after the experience: unique experience, very powerful, self-esteem, time management. You see what you have in the screen. Thank you very much.